Hello guys, so welcome to another session on TestNG, and in this session we will look at one of the methods from ITestListener interface, and that is onTestFailed but within success percentage. Okay, so in the previous video we briefly talked about that, but in this particular session we will actually implement this and look at one of the examples. Okay, so let's go to IntelliJ, and this is the ITestListener class which we used to implement ITestListener. And here we will go to ITestListener interface, select generate and override methods, and selecting the method which we want to implement now. And here I will be commenting out the existing line and add a custom message here saying test failed but within the expected percentage range, right? And we will print the name of the method which actually failed, and for that we will do result dot get name. Okay, we have implemented this method, but in order to capture this message we need to have a method which actually runs multiple times. Okay, so the concept is like we will make a method which executes repeatedly for the specified number of times, and out of all those times, if it fails couple of times and if that failure ratio is within the expected range, right, even that expected range we are going to provide, but not the fail percentage but the success percentage we will be giving, so that if the per success ratio or success rate of those iterations is within the specified limit or range, then we will mark the entire test case as pass, else we will mark that as fail. So for that let me create a new class, and let me name that class as failed but within success percentage test. Okay, this is that class, and within this class we will write a test method, and this test method public void will give name that test method as flaky test, and we will write the body of that method. Okay, now for that, even before that, let's add a class variable. Okay, so since I want this to run multiple times, I am now going to create a variable which stores an integer number, and every time this method runs, the count of that variable increases by 1. Say for that what I will say is int, and counter is equal to 0. I'm initializing that counter with value 0. Okay, and now here what I will be saying is counter, and this counter I want to increment it by 1. So whenever we add plus plus after the variable name, that means the current value of the counter should get incremented by 1. So in this case the current value of counter is 0, but as soon as this method starts executing and the executor reaches the line number 11, it will increment this 0 by 1. So now the counter value will become 1. Okay, here on this counter let's add a condition which is if counter is less than or equal to 1, right, if the counter value is less than or equal to 1, let us mark this test or test iteration as fail. So for that I will be using assertions, and instead of checking any condition like equals or true, I'm simply saying like as soon as the executor hits this line 14 and reads assert.fail, this test should be marked as failed. So test failed, and here we can give some message saying marking the test as fail or fail or failed. Okay, that's what we are saying. And let's import assert. Alright, so now the first time it executes, the counter will increment counter by 1. So now when this condition executes, 1 is less than or equal to 1, so the executor will enter the line number 15, and since we are instructing to fail directly without checking any conditions or without any doing any further validations, we are simply saying as soon as uh, the executor or JVM reaches this line, just fail the test iteration. That's what we are seeing. And once it fails, it goes back, and now the counter, since the next time the executor enters this method, the counter value previously was 1 will now be incremented by 1, so now the counter value is 2. And if counter 2 is less than or equal to 1, so which the condition is not true, so it won't go inside and mark this test as failure, but it will complete, and it will go back and increment this counter again by entering and coming to line number 12. But how does this method know like how many times it has to execute, right? I didn't specify anything like how many times it has to execute, and there is no for loop also. Even if we have a for loop, then without going outside it will be executing within inside. So how to iterate or how to execute this method repeatedly, right? So for that we need to add two parameters to the test annotation, and the first one will be invocation count. So this invocation count specifies how many times this particular method should run when this method is called. So we are saying execute it for 5 times, and the success percentage we are expecting should also be given as a second parameter or attribute, and here the value we are going to give as 80 percentage. So what we are saying is out of 5 times, right, out of 5 times this test executes, it is okay to fail once, right? Then which makes the success percentage to 80. That is like out of 5, 4 tests passed, and the percentage of that will be 80 percentage. So we will be okay if one of the iterations out of this 5 is failing. Okay, but if we change this 80 to 60, right, if we change this 80 to 60, now what does this mean is it is okay, right, out of these 5 iterations if the test fails twice. So that's what we are saying. So if the test fails 2 times out of these 5 iterations, which comes to 60 percentage of success ratio or rate, so that should be okay, and we are asking TestNG to mark this test as pass. Okay, let us see this. I am changing this back to 80 percentage, and we will run this test, but before that we need to make a change to our testng.xml. so this is the listener we still want to stick to, and assertion test will now become failed but within success percentage test, and changing this to ITestListener method test. Okay, we have made the necessary changes, and now let us run this one. Okay, and without these parameters this test will be executing only once, but since we have these two attributes added, now this test is expected to run 5 times. Okay, let us run this. Alright, so now this has executed 5 times. Actually we are it is confusing since we are not printing the iteration number, so let us add another statement over here as current counter number. Current counter value. Okay, let us run this. Current counter value, so that is the first iteration, and the first iteration failed because the condition here is matching, so that's the reason, which is like 1 is either less than or equal to 1, right? So the condition has met, so it went inside this if conditions body and directly marking that iteration as failure, right, as failed. So that's the reason we are seeing the message also here, test failed but within the expected range, that is coming from this method, right? So this is the message we wanted to print, which is getting printed for the first time when the test failed. Okay, because it is okay to fail at least one according to the percentage we have given here. Okay, and when the counter has become 2, the condition didn't met, so didn't meet the condition, that's the reason it didn't go inside, but instead completed that iteration and started the third iteration. This time the value counter value is 3, and likewise it continued until 5 iterations, and overall the test status is passed. Okay, but here in this summary, little summary we can see total test runs 5 because we have given 5 times to run, and passes 4, failures 1, even though there is one failure, and since we said it is okay to fail at least once, then because of that it marked the entire test case as pass, and it is giving 5 tests pass above here, but the real result we can see down below. Okay, now let us say if we change this one to 2 in this if condition, so now what happens is this test will fail 2 times, right? Out of 5 times it runs, this test will now fail 2 times, and the success percentage will come down to 60%, which is below our expected 80%. So the test execution or the entire test should be marked as failure. So let us take a look at that. Right, now this time we see one test failed. Okay, so if we go and check our logs, current counter value is 1, and that test failed, and that is okay according to the conditions we have given. So this printed this message as test failed but within the expected range. But when the second time it failed, when the counter was 2, it didn't print this message because this has exceeded the failure percentage what we were expecting. So that's the reason, since it is not within the range, specified range, it didn't print this message over here. So instead it is saying marking it has failed the test, whereas the third iteration, fourth iteration, fifth iteration passed. So even though 3 iterations passed, it failed twice, so the success percentage is only 60, not 80 or more than 80. So that's the reason test marked as failure, right? And in the little summary we have here, we see total test runs 5, passes 3, failures 2 this time. And here it says one test failed. It has run 5 times, but even though it failed twice, it is saying only one test failed, because it is not considering this particular iteration test as failure, because it is okay to fail at least once. So it is skipping that one and adding that test to a passed number, and it is saying 4 tests passed. But for the test which failed without this message, it is considering as failed. But if we change this to 3, this number changes to 2 tests failed and 3 passed this time, right? Why? So why? Because it has this message for this iteration, so it is considering it is a valid test, that is to fail at least once. But these 2 times it failed, it didn't have that message printed, because it is not expecting to fail more than once, so it didn't include them as passed tests, but added them to the test failed, and overall it gave 3 tests as passed here. But the real result we can see here, total test runs 5, passes 2, failures 3. So that is about this method, which is on test failed but within success percentage. I just wanted to show you this one because this is a very interesting method, so thought of demoing this as well to you guys. All right, see you in the next video.